Welcome to today's webinar on how to control and secure your DBAs and developers. My name is Phil Ryman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Integrity, and I'll be the moderator for this e-learning session. The speaker today is Michael Miller. Mike. Mike is the Vice President and Chief Security Officer of Integrity and is responsible for Integrity's security assessment services. For the past 16 years, Michael has focused exclusively on Oracle's e-business suite and is set on Oracle's Customer Advisory Board for security and on Oracle's On Demand. I'll now turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Phil. So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you're coming in from. Today's topic, as Phil was alluding to here, is how to control and secure your DBAs and developers. This presentation has been is going to focus on Peoplesoft, though I will point out it does have parts of a larger methodology that it could apply to enterprise software in general. So we'll take the first part to kind of go through, break down some overviews and a brief one-slide introduction with regard to Integrity and who we are and what we do. But really, I want to start the deeper conversation to talk about privileged accounts within the database, and certainly privileged accounts within the context of PeopleSoft, and then pivot over into best practices. We'll end with a conversation in around logging, auditing, and monitoring, and take some time for questions at the end. So Integrity, this is an educational webinar, so we'll limit this to one slide, but it's usually helpful for those who haven't worked with us or read some of our white papers prior, just for a brief intro. So we have two lines of business. We have services and product, and really one hand feeds the other, so to speak, as far as what we find working with our clients in our assessment services, as far as sensitive data or penetration compliance exercises. We fold and cross-fertilize, what we find there as far as features and functionality back into our product set. So our products, AppSentry and AppDefend. AppSentry is a tool that is really purpose-built for auditors to help go through and do audits of not just the database, but also of PeopleSoft as far as baseline checklist of recommended best practices and hardening standards. So not just for PeopleSoft, but also for the Oracle e-business suite, as well as standalone databases, Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, etc. And AppDefend is a purpose-built application firewall for PeopleSoft in the Oracle e-business suite. So two lines of business, and we really, one side of the house supports the other there. So let's get on over into a discussion in regard to generic accounts. So just to set the table here, a dictionary definition of a generic privileged account is an account that is used by multiple people and has significant privileges, right? Be it in the operating system, in the database, or the application. And so this is really today's topic of conversation, is as far as how do you secure and control these privileged accounts within the context of your PeopleSoft implementation. So PeopleSoft has a number of highly privileged accounts. These accounts are used not just to assist with the installation of the database and the PeopleSoft application, but I would also say are very much used in the day-to-day running and maintenance of your PeopleSoft implementation. Either applying patches or just general health and maintenance. The majority of data breaches, unfortunately, are committed by insiders, right? So what I'm referring to this is the annual Verizon breach reports, which if you page through those for the past, I would say at least a couple decades, you're going to see, insider threat is really always, I would say, in the top three, if not the top two. This insider threat is not necessarily always a nefarious action of a disgruntled ex-employee or a contractor. but is also very much, unfortunately, due to accident, right? So a good employee trying with the best of intentions to do something either has an accident or is not trained, and um, they make a decision that could result in a data breach. So privileged accounts are, in this context, is really what we're driving at here today. So Peoplesoft generic accounts, let's go up from the bottom up. Assuming that we're working with a Linux operating system, we're concerned with the root account, the God account of the server itself, the operating system, as well as for the server supporting the Oracle database, the Oracle account. So this is the operating system account that's created through the installation of the Oracle database, and this operating system user basically owns all the data files that define the database. Within the database itself, there are the system accounts. So the install of an Oracle database easily creates, we'll say, 25 to 30 accounts that just define and own the features and functionality of the Oracle database. So any Oracle database will have these accounts. The two most important of these accounts are the SYS and SYSTEM accounts. So the SYS account owns the objects, and the SYSTEM account is really the God account that is commonly, or should be commonly, used by DBAs for the day-to-day maintenance. And by that, I mean that really only the DBAs would have good reason to use that. You know, the system account is an account that certainly we would recommend not handing out to developers or even junior DBAs. If we're building up a multi-layer birthday cake here of technology, we got the operating system that we just talked about, right, as the first layer. The first layer of the database is that SYS and SYSTEM I just talked about. Now we have the Peoplesoft accounts. So we have the SYSADM and the people schemas. So the SYSADM, this is the schema in which all of the data, all the tables that the Peoplesoft uses to define transactions and the configurations are owned by SYSADM. So the SYSADM account has access to all Peoplesoft data. The people account is part of the, we'll say, the handshake when an end user logs on to the Peoplesoft application. The people account, the people user is that user that is first used to authenticate, and then supports the password challenge for the end user. So very much concerned with the SYSADM, but also concerned with the people account. When we get inside the Peoplesoft application, there are a number of seeded application accounts, such as the scheduler, such as the administrator, such as guest. And I have a few slides that come up and talk about that in a little bit more detail. But this is what we're really talking about here today, are these accounts and how best to secure, control, and monitor them. Some of the dangers and how privileged accounts can be exploited, either for nefarious purposes or somebody with a lot of creativity and maybe not the clear intentions or the best intentions, or some of what we see here as far as if I start with the Oracle database account coming into the operating system, if I have access to that Oracle God user that owns the database, I can connect in a SysDBA and then execute SQL. Likewise, if I start with one of the forms inside the Peoplesoft administrator account, there's various ways where I can execute SQL and have that SQL executed not just as a, we'll say, and have that SQL executed as a highly privileged user, have that SQL executed as SYSADM. Likewise, I can connect straight to the database and potentially be able to even execute SQL as or more elevated, with more elevated privileges as the SYS account. So you could see While this might be a little confusing here, the point I'm raising is that these generic privileged accounts can be used in multiple ways for multiple, we'll say, attack vectors that you need to be concerned with. This is some research we walk through with our clients. A few of our PeopleSoft clients over there, I would say over the last 12 to 18 months. And some of the responses we're getting here is, how concerned are they about privileged accounts? So we, most people are concerned. Some people, somewhat, right? But then it's always curious here as far as the knows and the don't knows. That said, how actively managed are the privileged accounts? So whereas before 65% of the people said that they were concerned, what are they doing about it, right? And so it's just kind of where do you fall in this spectrum? Could be interesting. And again, Phil, as Phil said, there'll be a version of this presentation up on our website here shortly. But most people, while they might be concerned, are doing something, but most likely could be doing more, right, with regard to 35% doing something, or 10% not knowing, or even close to 20% not doing anything. So if that's the problem that we just developed, how do we approach this? How do we approach securing developers, PeopleSoft developers, and DBAs supporting a PeopleSoft implementation? So Security 101 really lays out that you need to think about defense in depth, that there's no one tool, there's no one team, there's no one particular process or technique that is going to secure you. So you need to think about multiple supporting security techniques and tools. And really with regard to a database, whether it's a standalone database, whether it's a PeopleSoft database, or it is a supporting SAP or even the Oracle E-Business Suite, first and foremost, you need to think about restricting physical access to the server. All database exploits, we'll say 99.9%, require to exploit a vulnerability require a session, right? So if I cannot physically connect to the database, I am providing a large amount of defense. So by this, what we're talking about is, firewalls, right? More than just firewalls at the perimeter, right? But thinking about firewalling off, your data center, or even potentially just segmenting the network and putting firewalls around your PeopleSoft databases. Logically segmenting this, you can do things such as building out jump boxes or bastion hosts. There are tools that you could bring to bear, such as session managers, Power Broker, CyberArk, or the Dell TPAM, right, that allow you to logically do the same thing and support by a stronger policy mandates that you can mandate that your DBAs go through a jump box or go through a bastion host. And when they are connecting physically from that one source of, from that one IP address, from that jump box or from that bastion host, that's coming from inside your organization, or have a higher degree of confidence coming from inside your organization. And then from that jump box, from that bastion host, you can introduce tools such as keyloggers, right? That could potentially, log each mouse click and keystroke. So physical access, really first thing you want to think about. Second thing you want to think about is least privilege and use of these generic accounts. Not all your developers need to have access to SYSADM. Not all your developers need to know the system or the SYS accounts. And in fact, best practice of a management of an Oracle database really would lay out that you want to be end dating certainly most, if not all, of the accounts that are created by install of the Oracle database. You do need to keep the SYS and system accounts open. A good password governance unfortunately, common sense is not all that common, right? So really what we're thinking about here is that, again, if you're running a large organization, if your organization is the size that you need an ERP platform the size of PeopleSoft, most likely you have an existing password vault, right? Not a password safe that people are keeping individually on their laptops, but I'm referring to a password vault, again, something on the enterprise scale, such as the CyberArk, such as the Power Broker, such as the Dell TPEM, right, where you can run reports as far as who has access to what password, when those passwords potentially last changed, as well as being able to understand a little bit more as far as access to production passwords versus non-production passwords. Last but not least is trusting but verifying. So what policy mandates do you have for your developers and your DBAs? You might have, if you're processing credit cards, right, this PCI that's very prescriptive. If you're in the US, there are Sarbanes-Oxley and GLBA and various other privacy mandates, HIPAA, et cetera. You might also have specific contractual mandates coming from your legal department as far as a specific client contract or an interpretation of a state law. Here's where the trust but verify gets a little interesting, in that most organizations will do some sort of a background check on hire. Some organizations do background checks once a year. Really what we're talking about is, while that is a good idea, it's really out of scope of our topic here. What we're going to be digging into a little bit deeper in this presentation is the idea of what should you be monitoring for to verify the trust once the developers, once the DBAs are inside the database. So let's now talk a little bit more about the various accounts that you need to be concerned with, specifically within the PeopleSoft application. So the install of a PeopleSoft, right? And really what I'm looking at here, this screenshot was cut against an HR instance, but this is going to apply, I think, generically to a financial instance of PeopleSoft as well. In that we're concerned much more than who has the administrator role, right? There's about 25 plus or so power user roles that need to be secured. You need to be tracking this, doing, pulling it in your quarterly, we'll say, access reviews as far as who has access and per their job function, is that appropriate, right? And you need to think through, as far as, again, common sense is not all that common. There's organizational movements, and while someone might have been a power user or working on the help desk last year, they might have moved, and you need to make sure that you call their access, especially for the roles that I've identified here. Again, this presentation will be up on our website for those of you wanting to take notes. So we'll use this format pretty much for the next 4 or 5 slides, right, as we go through these different categories of accounts. And really what we're trying to do with you here is, what do you need to control? What do you need to log and monitor? And what do you need to audit for? So what we're talking about for users that have these the administrator roles, or one of these 25 or so power user roles, you need to make sure that per the job function, it's appropriate. Ideally, you're working with a ticketing system, right, that you can almost back in on a one-to-one basis for each logon to a specific change, right? You need to be concerned with production passwords. When you clone to create your non-prods, make sure that those passwords for those users get changed. And in production, you want to make sure that those users that have those elevated privileged roles, are being, those are subject to a more stricter password governance, that you're going to be rotating them, for example, every 90 days. And also, we would highly suggest if they're not globally managed and coming out of Active Directory, that as much as possible, the use of a password vault. But certainly, you want to make sure that you set up auditing and logging within the PeopleSoft. And in your quarterly audits or every 6 months, you want to be looking for, when the password was last changed, and you want to make sure that it's the appropriate meeting your password policy as far as the right complexity. Just as an aside, I'm putting some finishing touches on a white paper. It's a rather detailed white paper where I'm laying out a very specific Peoplesoft logging and audit framework, right, of what to enable auditing for within Peopletools, and then how to work with that as far as pulling it out and into a tool such as Splunk or ArcSight, and laying that over the top of some key database events. So small tangent, kind of a shout out, but keep looking at our website for that white paper that should be available in the next month or two. So seeded generic accounts, right? So we just talked about the 25 or so roles, right? These are 27 plus or minus accounts created by the install of Peoplesoft, and those are the ones you see down below. So these users, you want to make sure who has access to the passwords, who could log on, and do you need them, right? So if you don't necessarily, so follow the Peoplesoft documentation, and if you are not running the modules that support, let's say, the localizations in these countries, most likely you could follow the documentation to end date and or drop them. So what are we looking for with those accounts, right? So best practice, end date them, right? Use complex passwords, and just note that as of Peopletools 853, that when you do the install, unique passwords are being generated. Prior to that, you need to worry about, if you're on 852 or lower, you need to worry about some default passwords that are potentially well known to threat adversaries or just easily Googled. We'll go more into the framework, right, for looking at this, but certainly you need to be threading your quarterly audits. You need to be looking in your quarterly audits at these accounts for what we've bulleted out there. So again, taking a look at the end dating, the last use, and password complexity. If you are DMZ facing, if you have modules that are internet facing, the whole attack surface gets exponentially larger, the risks are higher, and you need to be much more concerned with this, because it's not just that, because we're talking again the physical access, it's not just within potentially the four walls of your office, but anybody on the internet who is curious about your website and is going to see if they could try to get in with some well-known passwords. Peopletools Access, right? So how Peopletools is built, those of you on the call here probably don't need to go into that in all that much detail, but you need to make sure that those people who are entrusted with building out panels and working with this type of access is appropriate, right? And think seriously about the SQR folder access and who has error correction mode, right? Are they senior enough in our organization to be trusted with that? You need to log, right? Especially, again, changes to the SQR folder access permissions, and look to that in your audit cadence. So moving, we'll say, down out of the application into the database, we like to lay out three silos here. We like to think about whether it's in your password safe or you're logging or auditing, monitoring, or certainly in your password policy. When I read corporate password policies, I always, many times I see a corporate password policy that is only addressing one stack here, and the recommendation is no, you need to think about it in three different stacks, right? So we have named users on the right, so these would be your DBAs and your developers, right? There are DBAs who have, who are logging in day over day, and that's their job, is the health and welfare of the database. You might have some applications and interfaces, right? But then you might have a collection of ad hoc users that are doing production support or development, right? So how you manage these accounts that are directly coming in is very different than the application accounts, such as the people and the SYSADM. And how you need to govern the people and SYSADM is again very different than the accounts that are created through the install of the Oracle database, such as SYS and SYSTEM. So more to it than this, you can find more on our website, but your password policy, the mandates, what you're telling auditors, what you're concerned about, and then what you're looking for in your audit cadence. Think about this picture, and that you really need to have a 3-part password policy. You need to think about 3 different types of auditing, and you need to think about 3 different types of monitoring. So with regard to the database accounts here, we have the SYS and SYSTEM, right? The SYSADM, right? This is the God account. It defines all the tables that are hold all the Peoplesoft data, right? You should have a very few number of people in your organization that have this password. It should not be handed out and to every developer for production support. Likewise, you need to protect your people and your integration broker accounts, right? They both have, certainly the integration broker has more privileges than the people account, though, and there's some attack vectors where you can abuse the people account to gain access to the SYSADM, certainly on some lower versions of, I think it's 853 and below of Peopletools. Just another slide that shows, currently in the last year, we took again from our consulting work here, we looked at 120 client production databases, right? And what we came up with here, as I'm calling out in red, is that these 25 or so accounts, again, system and system always exist, but many times what we're finding here is these default accounts exist, right? And they're using a default password, right? And so this is the danger, is that if you have not physically isolated and segmented your Peoplesoft database, if you're not funneling users through a jump box or a bastion host, this is a risk, because a threat actor could potentially attempt to log on directly to the database with one of these default accounts with the default password. Your password policy, again, going back to that chart prior with 3 different stacks or 3 different parts to your password policy, you need to make sure that you're addressing that and then auditing for that. This is the danger on the left-hand column there of the accounts that are created through the install of Oracle. So the SYS account, just a few quick things, right? You got to put that in a password vault, right? If you don't have a password vault, I would highly recommend looking out for some open source today, right? And then make sure that you're soon, maybe tomorrow, looking out for an implementation of an enterprise password tool. Within the database, within the Oracle database, you want to make sure that you have a SYS operations enabled. All right, so SYS operations equals true as a startup parameter, and its purpose is to specifically audit the operations of the SYS account. The system account, moving on, right? This cannot be end dated. It should only be used for administration and patching. Do not hand it out lightly. And when you are cloning it, make sure you change it. And we will go into a little bit more in the audit framework in the last part of this presentation, that we have some suggestions as to what to be looking for. But certainly you need to be looking for in your audits as far as the password governance and when last changed. The SYSADM account, right? Again, don't hand this out lightly. While the system account can pretty much do anything in the database, the SYSADM account can do anything within the Peoplesoft stack, because it is defining and owning all the Peoplesoft tables. You should, at all possible, to as much as possible, attempt to reconcile direct usage of SYSADM to change tickets. And by what I mean by this is somebody logging onto the database from their laptop using SQL Plus or using Oracle SQL Developer, right, into the production database as SYSADM. Ideally, you're not allowing that. You're funneling people through a jump box or a tool such as PowerBroker, where you can connect the OS user account to the usage of the SYSADM. There's some tools out on the market that database activity monitoring tools. We can talk about that time permitting here, but tools such as Guardium, McAfee, and Imperva do have features through the use of agents that allow you to do OS user chaining to help automate that linkages between the OS user and specific SQL being parsed. That said, while powerful, those tools tend to be more Cadillac solutions, right? You're probably not buying an Imperva or Guardium to protect a single Peoplesoft implementation. You would be extending a license that you've probably purchased elsewhere in your organization. So general IT controls here, thinking about database accounts, right? You want to, within the Oracle database, if you're not familiar with password profiles, these are rules that you can define within the Oracle database in and around password complexity and lifetime, right? So I could say, remember that picture where I had the 3 stacks, there's 3 different types of database passwords. I have my service accounts, my application accounts, and my named user accounts, right? So at minimum, you want 3 separate password profiles. The default unlimited profile that was created by the install of the Oracle database, we would recommend that 0 accounts are assigned to that. And what you want to make sure, that in your audits, and we'd also recommend that you use the out-of-the-box Oracle custom. Either use the out-of-the-box Oracle password verify function, or come up with a custom one. And what I mean by this is that Oracle provides a password function that says, for example, there's one that meets the U.S. military's password complexity recommendation for, as defined by the DISA-STIG, and it has, a specific length, the specific number of upper and lowercase punctuation characters and numbers, right? So in other words, this would help you put a best foot forward such that it doesn't matter who is attempting to create an account and or change a password, that they wouldn't be able to do so because the data wouldn't be able to create a weak password because of the password complexity function, right? So make sure you use password profiles. Make sure you use password profiles that are aligned to your password policy, and make sure that you also use the password verify function. Default accounts, right? So Oracle gives you a tool. There's a view created by the install of the Oracle database called DBA user with default password. It's okay. It gives you, a few dozen permutations, maybe a few hundred, depending upon how you're looking at it. But there's definitely tools out there. For example, our App Sentry that has a rainbow table of well over 1.7 million hashes that we're going to be looking for, right? So you want to make sure that your SYSADM password is not the same as your local sports team, such as Red Sox or Patriots or something equally easily guessable, right? If you own such a tool, you want to make sure that you're using it on a regular basis. Otherwise, it doesn't do you any good to have purchased it, right? So certainly after each database upgrade and each major PeopleSoft patch cycle, think about what could have been done with those passwords. It's not unsurprising for passwords to be flipped or changed, and you want to make sure that that which you close doesn't come, doesn't, unbeknownst to you, be reopened. A few notes with regard to the operating system, right? We want to certainly control the root account, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the Oracle account, right? So ideally, you have a division of duties between your sysadmins and your Oracle DBAs, right? If at all possible, make sure that your DBAs do not have access to the Oracle account and vice versa, right? That the sysadmins will use root for the maintenance and health and welfare of the operating system, but really have no business logging into the database and vice versa, right? So we would recommend setting up syslog auditing, right, at the operating system level, and if at all possible, setting up keystroke and command logging on top of that. So again, DBAs should never have root access. DBAs should have named OS accounts, right? If you have it all, if you have gone that step that you've defined out in Active Directory, think about using that and pulling it into the database, right? So that's usually something I like to see in an audit as far as globally authenticated users, right? So I would see that, for example, M. Miller, if I look in user dollar, right, I'm going to see that M. Miller is a global authenticated user, and that I would, if I wanted to, then I could connect as SYSADM, and then if through the logging, I would be able to track that. And then just another note as far as, avoid SSH key or trust logons, right, between servers. Certainly, you want to contain the blast radius for a compromised password or a compromised account or server. So best practices, right? So let's spend a few minutes on this. I think we've laid out some what to audit for, and let's just summarize a few of the things that I've already spoken to. So a Bastion host, again, there's commercial products out there, TPAM, CyberArk can offer this, but you can also build out a Linux server and just policy mandate that you drive people through that. The database itself also has the ability to restrict network access. You can set up within the Oracle listener the trusted, whitelisted servers, right? You can build out ACLs. Think about that, right? Think about also with regard to the Oracle Database Vault. If you're not familiar with the Oracle Database Vault, this is the purpose-built tool by Oracle. They've designed it to quote-unquote blind DBAs and/or developers. It is a separate license option, but it does offer a very compelling value proposition, certainly to the topic here today. I think I got some slides later on the Database Vault, so we might probably come back to that. Change the defaults, don't use weak passwords. Think about use of a random password generator. Again, tools such as the CyberArks and the power brokers and the TPAMs have this best practice right at your fingertips, right? Make sure you use different passwords for production versus non-prod. Again, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to contain the blast radius, right? Compromised accounts, either people by accident typing the wrong password, and thinking they're doing something in dev, but in reality they've been distracted and they're doing something in production. Hard coding passwords. Hard coding is usually a bad idea no matter what, but certainly hard coding of passwords is not recommended. And again, there's various ways around that, right? You can do things with Oracle wallets, right, for free. If you're not familiar with what an Oracle wallet is, it allows you to set up a trusted, we'll say, file encrypted within the operating system that if you have a script that's connecting to an Oracle database, that the script could call the wallet or use the wallet. So very useful. If you're not familiar with that, hit the Oracle support site and read up on it. We also have some material on our website about that as well. But certainly the CyberArks, the TPAMs, the other password vaults of the world, they all have APIs that you could use to also automate and call such that you're not hard coding passwords. And last but not least, the least privilege and need to know, right? So when you are rolling out password when you're doling out passwords, doing so prudently, right? However, some shops are small, and if you have 3 or 4 people that are doing everything, that sometimes gets harder to do. One thing you can do with that, though, is periodically inventory your generic and privileged accounts, right? Ask questions and call where you can. Have an owner for each account, right? Somebody who can make that decision as to, yeah, Mike should have that or Mike should not have that. Think about passwords within the risk classification, right? So it's not just prod, but non-prod, but maybe your HR database is also running payroll and you have all the employee bank accounts and social security numbers, and that has a different privacy concern, let's say, than your general ledger, which is probably maybe more subject to Sarbanes-Oxley, right? Adopt a formal password policy, right? Train, enforce, make sure that it's aggressively supported by C-level policy mandates. This is always a fun question to ask in an audit as far as, hey, if somebody leaves, where's the policy that says in writing you have to change key passwords, right? And that goes for not just you, but also think through if you have managed services or you have a hosting or cloud situation, right, where you might have for that 24/7, in order to have that 24/7 coverage, there might be 30, 40, 50 employees of your outsourcer that might know that password as well. When's the last time you audited? And just some questions that you can ask yourself here. But I'll let you ask and answer those questions yourself, but we wanted to lay them out for you here. I think I've talked ad nauseum about a password vault, but as you can see, it's really fundamental to what we're talking about here. Is a very cheap and easy way to shrink your trust perimeter, right? And really allows you to help not only ask but answer questions as far as who has access, right? I was just working with a client this morning, large regional bank, and we were talking about of all their different initiatives going on that their password vault implementation would be what we would prioritize as what they had as a medium or a minor, almost minor project. We reprioritized into the bank's most important project because it would give them the most bang for the buck for controlling logically access to their databases. Some other things to think about to take your use of a password vault a step further. If you have one, think about as much as possible a drop-down field to say, hey, wait a minute, before you pull the password, cough up a ticket number. Make sure that that ticket number is not just a free-form text field, but ideally be able to throw some logic in there to make sure that that ticket's actually signed to you. So if Mike Miller is pulling the SYSADM password for production, make sure that that ticket is assigned to Mike Miller first. And then also think about everything that's going on inside your password vault, syslogging that out to your centralized, we'll say, security data lake or Splunk or ArcSight, QRadar, whatever you're using. You need to implement an access management policy across the board that backs into all of your compliance recommendations, right? And really bake that deeply into your overall database security program, right? While access management is important, it's also only one component of database security. That's actually a topic for a larger discussion. But you need to think about, access management and certainly have some well-written policies in and around it. So logging and auditing, I think I'll kind of walk through this quickly. As I said, I have a white paper that is going to share some specific research on how to enable auditing within Peopletools, what specific panels and tables you want to be auditing for, and then what to do about it as far as also not just alerting, but also overlaying it with key database events. So look to that to be available on our website in the next month or two. But in the general sense, logging and auditing is the key to establishing a trust but verify policy, right? We have, there's really no other way to do this, right? the most organizations, unfortunately, don't take full advantage of logging and auditing, right? The requirements are difficult, and most people end up with a compliance checkbox. So what we're talking about, and again, this is in the white paper that I'm going to be sharing with you, but at a database framework level, and what we are working with clients actively is that think about a foundation series, right? And for the database and for PeopleSoft, and building out a security layer first, right? Backing into compliance as a secondary, and then pulling that all together in a centralized logging solution such that you can build those panes of glass for each level of management as far as what they are concerned with. So our framework methodology here, we have some generic events, right? But really when it comes down to it is this, as far as we've backed into PCI really is the most prescriptive. And then when you're sitting down with auditors, either internal or external, you can have this conversation as far as of the data that's in PeopleSoft, how are you meeting ISO 27000 or SOX or PCI? And what the framework is doing with you is starting out, with a level 1 baseline auditing, some things if you already have that in place, how to, once you've centralized it, moving on to some more advanced correlation, and then a never-ending, we'll say, continuous improvement loop of a level 3, which you can build more and more different layers of security in over time. I think I've taken most of the time there. Phil, do we have any questions?
Hey, Mike. Yes, we do. There's several questions here, actually. The first one, how do you differentiate a human logging directly into the database as a SYSADM versus an end user logging into a PeopleSoft user interface, which also results in an SYSADM connection?
Gotcha. All right. So we have somebody using SysADM and they're connecting connecting to the database, and you need to sort out the noise from, we'll say, pull out the needle out of the haystack, right? So we'll answer that a few different ways. So if you again have a tool such as the Guardium or Imperva, there's tools that gives you. But you can also do it a different way with what we've seen working with clients is as far as through the use of some logon triggers, as well as potentially if you're funneling people through a Bastion host or a jump server, right, where you can have a little bit more, have if its traffic is coming from a certain whitelisted set, an IP address or set of servers, that you would be able to turn on additional auditing to answer that question. If I haven't answered that completely, please follow up with info at integrity.com, and I can take more of that offline if you so want.
All right, next one. How should you monitor and audit privileged PeopleSoft accounts?
Well, I'd start with maybe a repeat of this presentation, but certainly you want to think about your policies first and foremost, right? You want to make sure that you have a good password vault implemented, and that the password vault is supported by strong governance and policy mandates, and that you have the login and auditing regime in place. Also think about, again, the need to blind DBAs and developers, right? So the Oracle Database Vault, I would read up on that.
All right. Next one. How can you find out in advance who will be affected by a password change?
Testing. That's the first thing that comes to mind. It's kind of a quick and cheap answer, but certainly other than testing, it would be how robust is your password safe, right? And so as far as your documentation, as far as who's consuming and using what password.
One second here. Are there activity monitoring solutions record what a user is doing while using shared accounts?
All right, yeah, let me answer it this way. So there are keyloggers out there that, like third party, that if you set up a jump box, a Windows jump box, right, that DBAs or developers prior to, they physically or by policy, they cannot log directly on, that they have to go to the jump box first and then connect, right? And then there are certainly a number of keyloggers that you can install on that. Likewise, there, the CyberArks, the Dell TPAMs, and the Power Brokers also offer keyloggers. So kind of two different price points. You got the more expensive or most expensive down to just a cheap and easy Linux or Windows jump box with a keylogger on it.
Okay. Next one. What are the best practices for Sarbanes-Oxley to control privileged accounts?
So Sarbanes, if I have the complex, if I look at compliance and I think about what's easiest to meet and what's hardest, I think I would put PCI, credit card security, on one side, and then at the other extreme, Sarbanes, right? Yeah, HIPAA and GLBA kind of in the middle, right? With privacy mandates, SOX for me is more of a statement in around control of your database and whether or not the data inside of it, certainly the financial data, can be trusted, right? So the integrity, and with that, I think being able to have some demonstrable, strong policies in place, and backed up by, we'll say, evidence of a good, solid audit cadence, looking to enforce those policies.
Well, thank you, Mike. Very informative session on Peoplesoft and how to control your DBAs and developers. That's the end of our session for today. I want to be sure to welcome everybody to join us out at Collaborative 17. That's in April 2nd through the 6th out in Las Vegas. We'll be out there giving about 9 different presentations during the 5 days, I believe it is. But we do have time during the day to be able to meet with our clients and prospects and talk about your needs and possible solutions that we can offer, especially on Monday and Tuesday afternoons. It seems to be open at this point. So again, let us know. And thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate your taking the time out of your busy day to listen to us. Have a great rest of the week.